All right, good morning, everyone. Let's get this show on the road. I have a couple of important things that I want to go over in class today, so I hope that this will be very beneficial for you guys as you begin to craft your paper, think about sources, all that good stuff. So let's dive right into it. Welcome to week 11. We're really getting through the semester. I say it all the time, but we're, every week getting a week closer to the end of the semester, which is kind of a nice thought, I hope. The agenda for today looks remarkably similar to how it always looks. So hopefully this isn't anything new for you guys. But a couple of announcements that I do want to go over is that the revisions are due this coming Friday, April 9th by 11:59 p.m. That means that you have this whole work week to work on that a bit. Please either email me or ask to set up a Zoom appointment with me if you need to. But I highly encourage each and every one of you to revise. I said in my email that revision is as integral to the writing process as the actual writing of the paper itself. And this is absolutely true. So I really encourage you to see it as just another step that is necessary for this paper. Because I really hope that each of you takes this opportunity to continue to improve your writing, because all writing can always be improved. Sure, you've heard me say that a million times, a couple of you at least. But the thing that I want to note about these revisions is that I ask that they contain a brief paragraph put at the beginning of the paper that outlines the changes that you made. I'm looking for kind of your audience-based reasoning of the changes that you made in a nutshell. Why did you make the changes that you did, besides me telling you that these things needed to be changed? How do the changes that you made either enhance the readability of your paper? How do they provide better evidence? Any niche that you're trying to fill with your changes is what I'm looking for in your paragraph. And you also need to highlight the changes that you make in the revised version that you send to me. These two elements are necessary for the revision. A lot of people, unfortunately, did not include these on the last revision. So I am slightly amending my syllabus to say that I will just not regrade a paper that doesn't include these two elements. They're both very important to considering how we need to make larger scale changes as we write. Learning from our mistakes is how we just write better for the presentation draft of the next paper. So these two elements are key, and without them, I'm not going to regrade your paper. I will send it back to you if it's before Friday and ask for those two elements. But next week is paper week. I am really looking forward to this because paper 3 is my favorite paper. I love it. But the thing that you guys can be excited about is that even though paper 3 is like generally the hardest paper to write, hey guys, Kansas. Even though paper 3 tends to be the hardest paper to write, it really, the class and the assignments in the paper, the fourth paper, really go downhill in difficulty from here. So you can look forward to that. I know I am looking forward to that. So as we trudge through the rest of this paper, just keep in mind that the University Wellbeing Day is next Friday. So our paper is due technically Sunday, April 18th. I think the submission spot for the paper opens well before that. So if you want to turn it in Friday and have a stress-free, hopefully, weekend, feel free to do that. But the last day to submit it is Sunday. And along that line, the Meet with Sheridan assignment next week will close on Thursday because I get the Wellbeing Day too, guys. So I will be making some changes to the schedule on the sign-up sheet on the Google Doc that I have linked on Canvas. So that will, not having Friday will be reflected in that. And a nice thing that you can look forward to, at least for next week, maybe look forward to it, is that there are 2 extra credit opportunities that go along with the revision. One is quite a bit lengthier than the other. It is a self-revision. Both of these extra credit opportunities are able to be submitted until Friday, but obviously submit them earlier if you want. I'll send out an announcement detailing those more next week, but keep those in mind if you're looking to bump your grade just a bit. I really hope that that's not too annoying for any of you, because it is very loud since I live near a park. The focus of today's class is sources, and I guess more broadly thinking about how we use our sources, use other tools available to us to be persuasive to a skeptical audience. Sources being one of the big ways we can do that. But also because you have an assignment that asks you to find all 5 of the required sources that you need. So on Wednesday, you have an annotated bibliography due. The annotated bibliography needs to include at least 5 sources, but you can include as many as you have. It would be like good practice, I've lost my train of thought. It would be a good little tool for you to have as you're putting your paper together to remember what your sources say and stuff like that. But the thing that I want to emphasize a lot is that the audience of this paper is skeptical. I hope you know that by now. I've said it a lot. So they're going to resist being persuaded by us. So we have to find ways to take extra steps to be persuasive to them. How we do this with sources is finding high quality, credible sources. I absolutely encourage you to use the K-State database. I know I showed many of you that in our one-on-ones for the last paper. The shameless plug for this service continues, but it really is awesome to find high quality sources. The low quality sources that we discussed briefly in the last paper, the .com websites, the content farms, are not going to be persuasive to a skeptical audience. They want to see good, reliable, convincing sources. And then an important thing to keep in mind is that, unfortunately, we as students, we lack the ethos to make our own claims about the issue that we're talking about. One of the ways in which we can build this ethos is by doing papers like this, doing research and finding sources, including them, demonstrating our ability to do that. But when we make claims about the issue, about why someone should believe in what we believe in, we need to go to great lengths to make sure that we're backing those claims up. Because one of the things that the skeptical audience will notice is that we are all students. I'm still lumped into this. It's lovely, even at my position in my educational career. We can't just make claims without backing them up. So we use quality sources. We build that ethos up to hopefully one day, be able to speak on topics with more authority. So keep that in mind. So what can be a credible source, you may ask, or not, but I'm going to tell you anyway. So a lot of you are writing about topics that you're really passionate about, and that is awesome. This should make writing this paper hopefully easier, if not tolerable. I hope that it's tolerable. If it's not tolerable, consider changing your topic, because this is supposed to be kind of fun. I think it's fun. You might not think it's fun. So hearkening back to the last slide, our skeptical audience is going to view us as students and think, you're not a professional. How do you know what you know? So we go, here is my credible source. Here is how I can back up what I know with things that other people know. And the sources that you can use to do this can take on a variety of forms. I know I suggested to many of you in one-on-ones or even just before the last paper was due that peer-reviewed credible articles are a really great place to turn to find good sources. And this is still true. They are awesome. But you are more than welcome to also cite other professors or instructors. If you are in a class that pertains to your topic, you can cite your class. If you're going to do that, let me know, because we can go over how to cite that properly. You can cite past textbooks, books that you have read in the past. All of those are fair game. But what I want to see is how you know what you know, how these opinions that you have been formed. So you learned about your topic from somewhere, so show where that somewhere is from. Can't emphasize enough that your audience is skeptical. They're going to not only resist being persuaded by you, but probably try to find any way that they can to just not be persuaded by you. So using good sources, using a variety of strong sources of sources, places or entities that could be sources, professors, lectures, classes, textbooks, peer-reviewed articles, will help convince that skeptical reader to not be so skeptical anymore. I've showed many of you where the K-State database is. I really do think that if you are struggling to find sources, if you really don't know where to start, this is an excellent place to turn to. I said earlier, many of you have heard my shameless plug for this service before. I'm giving it again because it has truly been, in my undergrad and even in my graduate school career, currently one of the most invaluable tools that I have when writing. So as you can see, we're looking at the K-State homepage, and on that academics button in that navigation menu, you can find libraries toward the bottom here. You click on that link, you get a page that looks like this. And there are two cool things on this page. One is the library chat feature, which should be familiar to some of you. As it advertises, it is 100% real librarians. I think every time I've used it, I've actually spoken to Dr. Kearns, who is the head librarian. So incredibly knowledgeable woman. She has helped me find some of the most obscure sources that anyone could think of. So I've never waited more than 3 minutes to get a response from someone when I use that feature. It's really awesome. I should note though that the hours on this chat are 9 to 5. I think it shows on the next page, but use it if you need to. But then also you've got this search bar and this database button here as well. If you have a specific article title, book title, thing specific that you're looking for, you can search for it here. But if you're not quite sure what you're going to be using for sources, click on this database link. You click on that database link and you get this page. 375 databases organized A to Z, but not including Z or other letters, a couple other letters. We have access to amazing databases. And that's even cool. I know someone is writing about certain chemicals that are used in food. Look, there's an American Association of Cereal Chemists. What the heck? It's so cool. There really is a database for any interest, either for your career, just academic interest that you may have. They vary from journals about the humanities to sciences, cereal chemists. petroleum geologists. Like, that's so cool. So you should be able to find something that will cover the topic that you are discussing. But if you're not sure where to start, they've got this not sure where to start little header down here. I think there are three or four databases here that are really popular. They're very broad, so those could be good places to start. Or you've got this Ask a Librarian chat feature here as well. I guess it doesn't say. I'm fairly certain it's 9 to 5. I know it closes at 5, so before 5, please use it. Figure out if serial chemists or petroleum geologists is for you. But it's awesome. Can't stress it enough. All right, gonna get off of my soapbox, stop my shameless plug. I tried really hard to find a pun to use for you guys. The best that I could come up with was, don't find crap sources, find crap sources. And if you're cringing, just know that I am also cringing internally. I'm not funny. I think I've made that clear before. I am demonstrating that now, but there is some truth to my horrible humor, that you should pay attention to the CRAP test, the library's Big 5 criteria for sources that we discussed in the last module when you search for your sources this time around. I would say, especially since we're doing more like persuasive research, the elements of CRAP that you're going to be looking for or should pay attention to the most is currency and purpose. I strongly advise against using any article that is 20 years old or more. If you can't find anything more current than that, library chat feature. But many of you are doing like scientific-esque topics, and you want to make sure that you're using recent, if not the most recent, data, statistics, conversation that is going on about the topic. 20 years old on those is not good. And then purpose. Thinking about who the target audience of this source is, what the author has at stake in writing it, why they would write it, all those good things. Find crap sources. I'm sorry, guys. So actually using sources in your paper. We touched on this briefly in the last paper. Excuse me. But I just want to reiterate it because it's so important. And I did comment a lot on the use of the source sandwich in the response paper. I like to say ICE. Source sandwich, when I say that, makes me feel like I am in 5th grade. I am not in 5th grade, so I like to say ICE. So your top slice or your introduction of the quote should have the author's name, their credentials, the name of the source from which you are pulling the information. The filling or the citing of your quote can either be a paraphrase or a direct quotation. The textbook prefers paraphrase when possible. I'm hesitant to jump on that bandwagon because direct quotes are awesome. I love seeing visibly where your ideas end and someone else's begin, as denoted by those quotation marks, but you're free to use a mixture of both. I will say that if you use the paraphrase method, often it's necessary to verbally mark where information is being pulled from someone else. So saying simple phrases like, according to Smith, blah, blah, blah. Smith argues that. Smith makes the assertion. Whatever kinds of phrasing that you want to use to throw in there to make it clear to your reader, hey, what follows this is not directly my own opinion, or I'm pulling it from someone else. So I think using a mix is a good idea. We like mix. And then the bottom slice, explaining your quote. So you see the ICE. I think I'm clever for that one. So explaining your quote, and this is a two-part process. And because the bottom slice, the explain, is two parts, I think this is the element of the source sandwich that I commented on the most in student papers, is that not only do you need to explain what message the author is trying to convey in the specific citation that you pull, but you should be showing your reader why you decided to pull that quote in the first place. How does it either support your argument, or how does it demonstrate the opposing viewpoint's position? So identifying the purpose of the thing in the paper is good. Proper documentation. I didn't focus a whole lot on proper documentation in the last paper because I was wanting to just take baby steps to this. Last paper we focused on finding sources and using them in our paper. I did talk to many of you in one-on-one sessions about proper documentation, but it wasn't something that I graded on. So that's going to change a bit with this paper. I'm going to be paying more attention to proper documentation because we're doing research. And having a thorough and correct paper trail is important here. So when we document our sources, we use documentation styles. So if you've heard of MLA, Chicago, APA, those things. English 200 does not require a specific style because I want you to use whatever you're going to use in the future. So I've noted here many people in the humanities tend to use MLA or Chicago. Many STEM fields use APA. But I really encourage you to figure out what style is used by your profession, by your school at K-State, and to practice using that proper documentation. Something that doesn't really change across documentation styles, though, is the in-text citation. So the in-text citation is going to be critical in this third paper because we are denoting immediately where a source comes from. This is an important part of not allowing someone to think that you're plagiarizing. So that's really important. I hope you guys think that. So I've given two just brief kind of very simple examples here of in-text citation. So if you are citing from a book, you've got words here with your quotation marks, first parenthesis, author's last name. I had this in color. I'm going to change that when I upload this because I like the different sections of the things being different colors. But the first part of this is the author's last name. And then the page number, final parenthesis, and then the period at the end of the sentence here. Note that it is not here inside the quotation marks. It is over here. And that is the correct way to do that. For an article, it's very similar. Words, 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 absence of a period, quotation marks, parenthesis, author's last name, this specific abbreviation, para, P-A-R-A, with a period, and then followed by the paragraph number. Final parenthesis, period. If you use a book or an article that has several authors, you would just put the first author's last name with et al. But we can, if you have one of those, you can let me know and we can do that on a case-by-case basis. But that's how you do that. If you have questions about that as they come up, please let me know. But then the final element of proper documentation for this paper is the works cited page. As I said on the last slide, didn't really require a whole lot of proper documentation on the last paper because we were just getting our feet wet with using sources. But the works cited page is now a critical aspect of your paper. This is kind of the gold standard for safeguarding your paper against plagiarism. accusations, which is what we want to do. Yeah, no one wants to get accused of plagiarism. So include a works cited. A works cited page should be the very last page of your paper. It should be on its own separate page with nothing else on it. And this is where the style could be different, where the APA is different from the MLA, different from the Chicago, different from the whatever other style you could probably find. So please ask me questions, send me emails if you are uncertain what style you should use or how to use that style to find out how to create your works cited page. I'll let you know. But the big thing that I want you to note is that for this paper, any paper that does not include a works cited page cannot get a higher grade than a C. I think at first glance that sounds kind of harsh, but the reality is that a paper that wouldn't include a works cited as you continue your career could be referred for plagiarism. So this is kind of meeting it halfway, that I want to emphasize the importance of it enough. I'm not going to accuse you of plagiarism if you forget a works cited. We're learning, I get that, but we're practicing remembering to include it. So use that kind of, if I don't include a works cited, I can only get a C on this paper thing to remind you to use it. And I am going to be hard on that. You could give me a 95 quality paper, but it will get a C if it doesn't have a works cited. It is that important. So, a lot of talk about sources, a lot of talk about documentation. This is all kind of in prep for this point, this persuading your skeptical audience, which is, our whole purpose here. So please, at every step of your writing process, remind yourself that this skeptical reader does not want to believe what you say, and really just will not believe what you say unless you adequately convince them. So you really should plan to spend as much time, if not a little bit more, discussing the opposing viewpoints, position, their claims, warrants, assumptions, all that. If you think back to the Kelsey Reith example that we read last week, she spends about the first whole half of her paper discussing the opposing viewpoint before she introduces her claim and supports her own position. So this is kind of a good representation of the expectation, rhyme, of kind of the difference between your own thoughts, what the thoughts of the opposing viewpoint would be. So I think I covered all that. Here are a couple of things what not to do. I really like having what not to do lists. So I hope you find them as helpful as I do. And here's your list. Please do not define your opposing viewpoint by American political parties. There are two reasons that we shouldn't do this. First, you don't want to ostracize your reader. You don't want the reader to feel like you are calling them out based on their political beliefs. We see time and time again that people's political beliefs are a very sensitive topic. You are probably more likely going to harden someone's belief or embolden their belief if you define your issue on a Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative basis. Please don't do it. I told the last class, and I do think that this is true. Defining your opposing viewpoint audience by American political party will probably, in the mind of your reader, totally compromise your paper. They will probably absolutely be turned off by your paper, maybe even not read it. So I'm not going to be that hard about grading it, but it is true. Don't define it by a political party. Give someone a reason to read your paper, or at least don't give them a reason to not read your paper, because that's what this would do. It is also very hard to just lump people into categories like a Democratic platform, a Republican platform, and then putting every individual in American society into one of those two categories. A majority of people don't fit perfectly into one or the other. That's another reason that we don't want to define issues by political parties. One example that I know of, many of you are writing on like conservation issues, recycling, biodegradable products, stuff like that. One of the biggest recycle everything nuts that I know is a registered Republican. So while maybe common belief would tell us that, you know, maybe a more conservative person would be less likely to be concerned about recycling, this person, at least, you know, to me, proves that just because someone is a Republican does not mean that they don't care about recycling, and vice versa. So it is a point being is that it's extremely hard to say because you are a Republican or because you are a Democrat, you think exactly this. We don't want to make that assumption. So that's why I just don't do it. That was kind of long-winded, but it's important. You also don't want to sell the opposing viewpoint short. Kind of, I guess it doesn't really go along with the first point. But what I mean by not selling the opposing viewpoint short is that you don't want to dismiss their beliefs as either just because they are uninformed, because they don't know any better, or because they're too dumb to know otherwise. With the issues that we're discussing, people have a reason that they believe in what they believe in. The reasoning might not be as good as yours, and that should kind of be what you're picking up on in your paper. But people, we need to give the opposing viewpoint due consideration. Why? What are their assumptions, warrants, beliefs? Something that we've been talking about all semester. Why do they think what they think? How can I address these concerns and bring it back to my own claim? And the last point goes along with the second point, is to not use ad hominem attacks. I realize that the verbiage of my points is a little weird because the first one says don't, and then the other two don't say don't, but it's on the what not to. I'm going to make that more clear later. But point being, don't use ad hominem attacks. An ad hominem attack, I think I've told some of you, is when you attack the character of someone. So you don't want to say that your opposing viewpoint is stupid, that they are a-holes. You know, you don't want to make those, you don't want to sound like a modern politician. Whoa. We're better than those older adults, guys. We're not going to use ad hominem attacks in our paper. I will comment on it if you do. It is not a good strategy. I think I've covered what not to do well enough. Don't do any of those things. And here's some things that you should do. So when you go about crafting your paper, thinking about how you're going to start doing that, consider how you want to approach the opposing viewpoint, because there's a couple of different strategies, and the textbook goes into a little bit more depth on these, that you can use to be persuasive. So the first thing that the textbook discusses that I want to discuss is the dialogical invitational strategy. So with this strategy, you can invite your reader to have a conversation with you in a way about your topic. Where are my people who read the Adam Grant article? It kind of sounds like motivational interviewing, because like in a way, it is a one-way form of motivational interviewing. But to use a dialogical invitational strategy, you can pose the occasional rhetorical question to get your reader to think about the issue from your perspective. You can invite the reader to consider the issue from your perspective, from your new perspective. Wow, it's like they go hand in hand. Or another thing you can do is work to establish trust and common ground. Many of you noted that with the wreath example from last week, that the delayed thesis seemed to make the opposing viewpoint feel like it was being considered. And that is one of the ways in which we can employ this strategy. And if conversation's not quite your thing, you can go for an ethos-pathos strategy, which is generally as, if not even more, strong sometimes. We talked about how the appeals can be so convincing. You can connect to your reader through a relationship. This is more likely to be done in an open letter because of how direct and personal you can be. The occasional use of personal pronouns is also acceptable. This is where I get to bite my tongue a bit, because some of you know that I comment on the use of personal pronouns, and the occasional use of them can be a very strong way to build that relationship with your skeptical reader. Don't use them too much though, because that can be an issue as well. Sorry, email popped up on my phone and my train of thought was totally derailed. So another strategy that we can use is to rely on the high quality credible sources that we find. So this is how we demonstrate our understanding of the issue, our ability to do research. This is kind of a more like academic strategy to use. Like, full disclosure, this is the one that I use as part of my work a lot, but you use whatever you want to use. And then finally, you can appeal to the emotions of your reader. We've talked about how this can be an extremely effective, for better or worse, strategy. So depending on your topic, you can try to make the opposing viewpoint angry about something. You can tap into a fear that they may or maybe should have, or you can try to invoke this sense of justice, of conservation, by identifying issues, these types of social issues. People tend to have, or they should have, a specific reaction to issues of injustice or of issues in which we are destroying the environment, whatever fits your claim. So invoking that can be a good way to emotionally appeal to your reader. So I've alluded to the example from last week a couple of times, but this is an example of an organizational strategy that many of you found at least interesting, if not pretty effective, but there were a couple of you who thought that it was relatively ineffective. So Reith wrote about transgender bathroom usage concerns and legislation. So she spent the first half of her paper engaging with the opposing viewpoint, and then didn't actually show us what her specific opinion on the issue was until much later in the paper. So yeah, kind of an unusual strategy, and it is, but I want to know what you thought of it. I know that you might not remember the specifics of the paper since we read it last week, but what I would like to see you tap into is kind of your initial knee-jerk reaction to it. Let me know in the chat. Were you confused by not seeing a clear thesis statement at the beginning of the paper? Were you kind of intrigued by it? Did you find yourself searching for the thesis claim? I know that when I read the paper for the first time, I was kind of like, what the heck did we include in this textbook? Like, I thought that the paper was going to argue that transgender people need to, what is the argument? Need to use the bathroom that coincides with their assignment at birth. And I was like, wow, this is unexpected. And then found the actual thesis, and Kelsey Reith just begins to discuss why those beliefs are problematic. And I thought, okay, wow, this is a very delayed thesis, but so that was kind of my reaction. I want to know what your reaction was. So take a couple of moments to respond. Oh, nope, back. Get yourself some extra credit for listening to me ramble. Right. Keep those responses coming in if you haven't yet, but we will. Turn to discuss. Ha, ha, ha. So far, I am seeing that it is pretty effective amongst your opinions. So if you don't think that it was effective, make sure to get your comment in so that we know. Because I will be kind of surprised if we're unanimous. My last class was not unanimous, so. The things that you guys are noticing are good. That Alexander says it was a bit confusing at first, but the paper was more intriguing because of it. And I agree. She spends a lot of time discussing the opposing viewpoint, why they believe what they believe. And the thing that I hope you guys at least note from it now after our conversation is that she gave the opposing viewpoint that due consideration that I said is so important. She took great steps probably to put herself in the mindset of someone who would disagree with transgender people using the bathroom that they want to use. And giving like some sort of credence to those, but then turns around and explains why that way of thinking, in her opinion, is wrong. Why they should, listen to other facts, listen to other opinions. I think that it was a pretty good paper for a delayed thesis. But yeah, Benedict knows that he was confused about it, and I was confused about it a bit too. It's one of those things that if you want to use it, absolutely go for it because it can be very cool. But it is definitely not traditional. And we don't have to be traditional, but everyone loves a deviator. Isn't it going? We've come to this part of the presentation. Here's the week ahead. Your annotated bibliography that I talked about earlier is due on Wednesday. As I said on that slide, you need your 5 sources to do this. So I wanted to give you an extra couple of days to do that. I had suggested that you have 2 by the end of last week. I hope that that is true and you only have to find 3 more before Wednesday. But regardless, make sure that you have those 5 sources, descriptions of them for your annotated bibliography in by Wednesday. We've got a brief quiz tonight about another student example. I want you guys to be able to see what a high quality persuasive research paper looks like. So read through that, get some ideas, steal some ideas, whatever have you. And then you've got a persuasive research plan due on Friday. And this is kind of like a skeleton of the paper, except a little bit more in depth. I told the last class, put some love into this assignment this week. If you do like anything extra for this class, which I hope you will. Putting in more effort for this persuasive research plan should really help you be able to put together your rough draft for next week, because keep in mind that Monday is when the rough draft will be due. So the more extensive your plan is, the more it could probably just turn into your rough draft, whatever have you. So are there any questions, comments, concerns, points of discussion that you want to go over? I'll take the crickets as a no. So if you have any questions about either the assignments, sources, paper, I heard someone on mute. You got a question?
Yeah, my question is how long does the peer review draft have to be this time? I know the first one was 2.5 pages and the last one was 2 pages.
That's a good question. We're just going to go with 2 pages because I didn't already change it. So even though this paper is a little bit longer than the last couple, we'll still just do minimum of 2 full pages for the rough draft. Great question. Any others? I'll take that as a no. So, as I was kind of saying, shoot me an email if you have any questions. I'd be happy to meet over Zoom. But with that, get out of here. Ha ha ha. Go enjoy the sun. Take a walk. If you have a hammock, go put it up. Have a nice time.
I have a question.
Yeah, what's up?
So I was looking for